Hello and welcome again to this edition of Meet the Candidates 2020 on WCMU Public Television. I'm David Nicholas. This time we are speaking with our guests remotely, and in this case joined by Kathy Goodwin. She is the Working Class Party candidate for Michigan's 5th Congressional District seat, a challenger in that race. Thanks very much for joining us. In the first moment or two, a little bit about you, your background, and the experience you bring to the campaign.
Thank you, David. I am a social worker by training, and I have worked in healthcare. So one of the things I bring to my candidacy is a deeply felt appreciation that the healthcare system is largely broken in the United States. Another thing that I bring to the campaign is that I am a very ordinary person, and that is the point of the Working Class Party. We really want to get to a place where for every office, we have working class people run as the candidates. I think there's a problem in this country that ordinary people feel alienated from politics. They don't trust politics. And I think that everything that we do in our jobs as frontline workers, making all of the different parts of the economy function are very important. I'd like to see working class people have pride in themselves as workers, and I would like to see working class people come together to build a new political party that really represents us.
Given that background then, you as candidate and the prospective voters you have spoken with, what would you identify as the top 3 issues you're wanting to address in this campaign?
I've heard from the voters that I've talked to about the real hardship that families are going through trying to educate their children during this pandemic. Safety absolutely has to be the priority, but I think that in the wealthiest country in the world, we really needed tremendous amounts of funding flooded into education this year because kids develop and they don't get a do-over on their lives during this year. And it's been very hard to have small class sizes, keep children safe. A lot of parents have had to drop out of the workforce or cut their hours back to be able to educate their kids at home. And I think that if the wealth that workers produce was actually available for the education of workers' children, we'd be in a different situation.
Have they addressed with you at all the issue of the broadband access that when kids have had to, back in the spring and even some at the start of this school year, remain at home and go to school remotely, the lack of access to broadband, has that come up in any of those discussions at all?
That has come up. It's been very difficult for households to stretch their Wi-Fi, particularly if there are a number of kids in the home, if one of the parents is working from home. I think that the Wi-Fi system that we have in this country was not prepared when COVID hit. And we really need that to be in every rural area. We need that to be in the inner cities. We need to be connected, and we're nowhere near where we need to be.
It's impossible to disconnect education from the reality of COVID-19 that we've come through, but if we look back up to education as a whole, what are the voters telling you they want addressed, or what are you seeing as what needs to be addressed for the overall education system if we try to look at it outside of the lens of the impact of COVID-19?
I think that COVID-19 brought to everyone's realization that smaller class sizes are necessary for the pandemic, but they've been necessary all along. For children to really achieve their maximum potential, the small class sizes that are happening because of social distancing are really what we need across this country, across Michigan, across my district, in order to have kids get the one-on-one attention from adults that they need.
And then as a policy or proposal point, how would you, what would you propose be done to get us to keeping those smaller classes even after we would emerge post-pandemic?
My solution comes from what I'm hearing from the voters. There are so many people that are underemployed, Their jobs are not paid a high enough wage for them to be able to survive. And why not have a jobs program where we flood the schools with teachers, where we flood the schools with maintenance people, where we have enough bus drivers, we have enough school personnel to really provide the education that we need. One person that I talked to was a little frightened by this because she said, won't my taxes have to go up? But ordinary people pay enough taxes already. The real problem in this society is the corporate wealth that is not taxed. The real problem is the handouts that go to corporations in the form of subsidies, tax breaks, and out and out gifts, whether they go to industrial companies, real estate companies. So much of the wealth that working people produce is not able to help working people have improved lives. And I want to see a change to that.
If we go back to the list then and we move from issue number 1 in that top 3, education, what would you and the voters be identifying as the top issue or top concern number 2?
I think a second concern that people have is fear of COVID and the pandemic. What it has highlighted is that our healthcare system is not able to really provide for the public health that we need and provide the PPE in a lot of workplaces that would be necessary to really be safe during this pandemic. I think that going forward, we really have to have a healthcare system that's funded well, that's available to all, that puts public health first. And that is really going to take a tremendous fight of working class people so that the wealth we produce when we work every day actually is brought back to our communities and not just in the hands of a handful of billionaires.
If you were looking at a system then that would move towards health care for all, and you've talked about the wealth produced by the working class coming back to benefit the working class more directly, are there numbers that you would cite or percentages of what you would identify as the wealth that's being lost that the working class is not seeing from the wealth that they produce?
I think that tax cuts for corporations over the last 20 years have really put the tax burden much more so on working class people. I don't have percentages or numbers. It's just watching it as a viewer of news over the last 10 to 20 years. I have seen that the percentage, say in Michigan, of the pie that goes to funding what we need in Michigan is funded way more by ordinary people than it is by corporate taxes.
If on the issue of healthcare also, you said the system was not adequate in the preparations for dealing with COVID, are there other issues, and this is similar to the question about education, that you can look at outside of that lens that you would want to address for healthcare, again, post-pandemic in the overall healthcare system, not just solely to be dealing with a health crisis as we are now, but healthcare in general, outside of wanting the healthcare for all? What other specifics would you want to address?
I would like to see a healthcare system where profit is completely removed. I think that there are so many hands in the healthcare pie, so many profits that have to be made at every step of the healthcare process. Profits made by pharmaceutical companies, profits made by medical equipment companies, profits made by insurance companies. And it's really making for a sick healthcare system.
Kathy Goodwin is the Working Class Party candidate for Michigan's 5th Congressional District, joining us on Meet the Candidates. And that brings us then to what you would say, and that the voters have told you is the third of the top 3 issues that you would want to address in this campaign.
Another issue I would like to address is the fact that in the 2016 election, over 100 million possible voters did not vote. And that is a bigger group numerically than all the people who voted for Democrats and all the people who voted for Republicans, if you separate those two out. And I think a lot of people do not vote because they do not see themselves represented in politics. They're suspicious of politics. They think politics is corrupt. And I have a whole different view of politics. I think politics is what we need every day to live our lives. And part of the idea of the Working Class Party is that we have ordinary people from all walks of life as our candidates. I'm a social worker, we have a teacher, we have a restaurant worker, we have a hotel worker, we have auto workers, we have retirees, we have a construction worker. And I think that the idea that workers ourselves know how to represent ourselves is something really important as a step forward. I think right now, a lot of times ordinary people want to make the Democratic Party be a workers' party. They want to make the Republican Party be a workers' party. But I think workers have to make the workers' party that we need that will fight for us.
We've got a little over a minute left, and I'm looking for maybe a little bit more clarification. You talk about the level of voter turnout and the feeling about participation. We've seen an increase in the efforts for absentee voting, early voting, and so forth, but your focus is on specifically that folks feeling whether they are part of the process or not in terms of a way, and how would you go about trying to change that attitude that might then take those voter turnout numbers and start to increase those?
I have as my message that elections are very important. It's the day where we mark the box and say what we stand for. But I think that 364 other days of the year, working people are going to have to come together and fight. I don't think that anything is ever handed to working people. I think that in the whole history of progressive movements in the United States, it's people coming together and fighting every day that brings the change. And I support the labor movement. I support the Black Lives Matter movement. I support any kind of movement where people are standing up for themselves.
Which does transition us, Ms. Goodwin, to a final statement, a final message that you might want to leave then with the voters as they get set to go to the polls, that overall singular final message that you would want to give to them as they prepare to go vote.
I think that politics is not just elections. I think that politics is working people every day, standing up for ourselves, coming together, fighting against racism, fighting against sexism, and fighting for having our needs met by a society that is focused first and foremost on the billionaires. We need a society, we need a party that fights first and foremost for working class people.
Well, we thank you very much for sharing not only your views and opinions with us, but also with those prospective voters in the 5th District. Stay safe and good luck with the rest of the campaign. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, David.
We have been speaking with Kathy Goodwin, the Working Class Party candidate for Michigan's 5th Congressional District. A reminder that under Michigan law, we invited all qualifying party candidates in these races to participate in our series. I'm David Nicholas. On behalf of all of us here, thank you for joining us once again. And please do remember to go out and cast your vote on Tuesday, November 3rd.